Welcome to Tech Tuesday number 35. And today we're going to talk about extracting the essence. What is the essence of the invention? How do we know what the essence is? Sadly, we're still going to start with a moment of silence because our hostage situation is not yet resolved. Okay, a very common question that we have is, what is an invention? How do we know what the invention is? There's an easy answer. You find the closest prior art, you find the difference from the closest prior art, you see what you can argue has an inventive step, and that's an invention. The problem with this way of doing it, that there's a magical step. Even if you found the difference from the prior art, you still need to figure out what the essence is and then possibly generalize it. And Elon used the expression of inflating a balloon, which we'll get to later, but you have to know what balloon you're inflating. Now, if you don't identify the essence, you might not protect the invention, and other people will copy the invention or maybe just design around the patent. And once we do have this essence, we can do all sorts of exploration activities and the other presentations I gave on that. Two things we're not going to talk about are how do we use an invention to add value to the client, meaning what should we be protecting? And another thing we're going to see today is all sorts of tools that can help you abstract out what the invention is. Some of them are analytical, some are holistic, and some require belief in magic. I like calling this a watermelon problem. The question is, how do you eat a watermelon? It doesn't fit into your mouth. So one way is you cut it. Now, cutting an watermelon into pieces is an example of analytical thinking. And today we're going to have lots of tools, but unfortunately, I don't have any prescription for you, just a set of tools which can and should be used when relevant. To keep you on your toes, we're going to have an example which we'll get back to from time to time. If you ever stepped on Lego bricks, you know that it is uncomfortable. But imagine if you step just right, and then you would get perhaps reflexology treatment by stepping on the Lego. Okay, so that's an invention. Okay, it's very vague what I'm saying, but basically you have Lego bricks and you're stepping on them and you're getting a medical treatment or quasi-medical treatment by doing it. And the question you should be asking yourself as we go through these different methods of determining the essence are, okay, what is the essence of this invention? And yes, my grandchildren left the Lego bricks out and didn't clean up, and somebody who won't be named was barefoot and walked on them. So. The first question, are we talking about the essence of the invention or the essence of the idea? And what's the difference? The difference is that an invention, you always talk about it relative to the prior art. And an idea does not depend on the prior art. I have an idea. So if you look at it from a, I'll call it scientific point of view, in one case, you're generating a hypothesis, and in another one, you're generating an alternative hypothesis. And perhaps one point we'll get to later is regarding the difference between US style claiming and European style claiming. In US style claiming, you write the essence. And in European style claiming, you first identify the closest prior art, and then you talk about the difference. So the difference is arguably a relative essence. A little bit of philosophy, because the word essence plays a part in philosophy. So Aristotle says the essence is what makes a thing be what it is. And there's something called an accident. An accident is not something which is the essence, but it is caused by it. And somewhere else, Aristotle also mentions that in order to really understand the essence, you have to look at examples, perhaps what we call embodiments. My definition is essence is what is required in order to match the vision. Maxwell, you know, I love the sentence of his, what is a particular go of it? What is that thing inside which makes it happen? The essence of it. Ayn Rand, an objectivist, the defining attribute of something contextually that makes it what it is mentally conceptually. Another definition tries to explain that essence is actually made out of several different parts. You have the values, you have the message, and you have the shape. And last but not least, existentialist, which we're not going to talk about today, so it was definitely remarked on LinkedIn that maybe I should have. But my philosophy professor used to get upset at me that I believe in essence, because he said essence is bad, but you're supposed to look at it as a relationship between different things. But today we're talking about the essence. So is drafting a claim the same as determining the essence of an invention? Some people say yes, but it can't be. And why can't it be? Because the claims only cover embodiments. They don't actually describe the essence. And we've seen that the European Patent Office definitely distinguishes between invention and claim. And I won't get into it, but they use it as an argument to reject certain types of medical treatments as being medical rather than technical. Claims are a very good tool. There's two problems with claims. Problem number one, when you work with claims, you naturally tend to think about one dimension at a time, and I'll mention that later. And the other problem is that when you draft two-part claims, you focus too much on the delta and you often miss the big picture. But one thing that's definitely similar between claim drafting and essence is that you need to know what exactly is doing what, to what exactly, what else, and why. That's what you write in the claim. And it's also perhaps what you need in the essence. And the same types of questions we ask when we draft claims are helpful, like how are we different? What do we want to be within the essence and what not? What is the underlying technical idea, and so on. So now I'm going to start with several different ways that people use in order to figure out the essence of something. We've talked in the past about CLDs, which are casual loop diagrams, and what they are is these cute graphs where you have nodes and they're connected with wires and it says plus or minus. And use them in system thinking in order to try to sketch out what a system is. And here's a recommended method. First, you identify key variables, and particularly you focus on the core, in other words, those variables which have a significant impact. You establish relationships between the variables, and again, you focus on the significant relationships. You draw the feedback loops, and again, it's recommended to highlight the major loops. Then you check it and you fix it. Now, the problem with this method is it has magic. And the magic is figuring out which ones have a significant impact. And the reason why it's especially difficult in system thinking is because system thinking is about nonlinear effects. And nonlinear effects means that a small change in a variable can have a very significant outcome on the output. But in any case, the tool that they are giving us is whatever impacts the outcome more, that makes it more essential. And remember, George Box, who was in statistics, said all models are wrong and some are useful. And that's what you're really trying to do in system thinking, is to build a model of the system. And the model is very similar to a claim with respect to how the pieces work together. Okay. Now there's a classical way of claim drafting. And in the classical way of claim drafting, you start with some detailed description of an embodiment, and then you start removing things you don't need. You take out elements, you take out relationships, you take out limitations, and you continue doing that until you can't do it anymore. And if you're trying to define a relative essence, you have some prior art, then what you do is you make sure that whatever result you got to doesn't include the prior art. And the idea here is that any embodiment encompasses the essence. But the problem is that you can very easily get caught in a local minimum. And we have this well-known quote by Albert Einstein that everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And when you start deleting stuff from a claim, you always have the risk of becoming too simple. But it's a way of figuring out essence. And then there's a constructive way of figuring out the essence. You start with something which is definitely not enough. Or maybe you figure out what makes it go, a part of what makes it go, and you start with that. And then you start adding to it elements, relationships, limitations, hopefully ones that relate to the minimums that you started with. And you continue doing that until you get something which seems to work, seems to describe the essence, and or overcomes the prior art. When you're actually drafting a claim, you usually add more than when you're just trying to figure out the essence. And as you can imagine, you can work in an iterative manner. You start small, you get big, then you shrink down, then you get big again, and so on. TRIZ. TRIZ is, I can't pronounce the Russian anyways, is a system for organized invention. And usually use it as a system to do inventions. In other words, here's a problem, we apply the system, we get inventions. But the way it was created was a very clever guy by the name of Altshuler, who worked in the Soviet patent office during World War II. He started noticing that there's similarity between the submissions of patent applications that he's getting. And the similarity was a conceptual similarity. So what he did is, after analyzing, and depending who you want to ask, but let's agree that it's more than 10,000, he formalized a set of concepts which are common to all of the abstracts that he looked at. And you can do it the same way. We take an invention that the client comes to you, and then we use the TRIZ tools in order to analyze it. For example, in TRIZ is something called separation. They have 40 different inventive principles. For example, separating out the function in time or separating out the function in space. These are two examples of separation rules, and you can apply them to the embodiment or invention that the client tells you and say, that's the essence. And another tool that is critical in TRIZ is looking for contradictions. And there's two kinds of contradiction. It's not important for now, but the point is, the minute you find a technical contradiction, In a problem, that's how you know that what invention should be made. So when you see an embodiment, or you see the client describes an invention, you should look for what is the forces which are contradicting, which can now be understood. For example, if we talk about the balloon, there's a contradiction. We want it to be big to make children happy at the birthday party, but we want it to be small so it's going to be cheap to transport. So that's a contradiction. So once we identify that contradiction, we can apply the separation of at one time it's going to be small and at a different time it's going to be big. So imagine that's how you would invent it. But imagine an inventor comes to you with a stent and you're trying to understand what is the essence of the invention of a stent. And you say, wait a minute, there's a contradiction. We're putting it in a small hole, but later it has to be big. And we can identify the separation, small now, big later. And places to look for these contradictions include both what is needed to be done, meaning the future, what is done, meaning the past, the present, and what was previously done, meaning what people did until now. So when a client comes to with an invention, he often says, here's what people did before. In any case, this won't give you the entire essence, but it's definitely a starting point, like with some watermelon, to start cutting it down to size. I mentioned that accidents are a term used by Aristotle to describe things that are caused by the essence, but are not of the essence itself. And I'm suggesting maybe we map accidents to embodiments and cool features. And once you identify something as an accident, you can ask, what is the essence which is causing this accident to happen? Now, unlike Aristotle and Plato and all those people, we don't believe in ideal forms. We believe in inventions. So the distinction between an essence and the accidents is kind of fluid. In fact, it's so fluid that if you can't get from one to another, then you're making a mistake. So how do we use this method? So it's a magical method. You take 3 examples, and these examples are really exhibiting all of your accidents, and then you look at them until you suddenly have an idea what the essence is which explains or generates these example embodiments. And that's why if you have only one embodiment, it's kind of difficult to do, so you should generate more than one embodiment, and we'll talk about that shortly. So I'd like to extend the accidental method. If you're familiar with Ouroboros, it's a snake that eats its own tail. And what I'd like you to consider is 3 different nodes. One is essence, some visionary idea. One is a claim that you're drafting, and one is embodiments. Now, if you know everything, you're going to have balance. The essence will match the claim, and the claim will cover the embodiments. In the real world, they don't. So what you need to do is, let's say your essence doesn't match the claim, you need to modify your understanding of the essence, or you modify your claim. In any case, one of the reasons why it's eating its own tail is because from the embodiments, you can get to the essence and then back again. And because there's no way of knowing what's happening. In other words, invention is about something that is not known yet and doesn't exist yet. It's not as if we have an essence which causes an embodiment. And in fact, it's often the case that after you analyze the embodiment, you say, oh, now I understand the invention. It's something different. I know it sounds a bit complicated. So let's understand for a second what you can do with an essence, and then we'll go back to our little Lego example. So once you have an essence, maybe you want to add an embodiment, saying, oh, we have another embodiment. Now we have to modify the essence so it includes that embodiment. Or maybe we want to remove an embodiment because we found some prior art. So now we have to modify the essence so it does not include that embodiment. Some cases you want to add, let's call it a sub-essence, because maybe you had the essence and now you generalized it. It's not only Lego, it's any kind of small thing, including M&Ms. And one more act that you might be doing in this playing around with the essence is refining the essence, making it more precise, more exact. Now, the only problem with what I'm talking about is that the essence is some sort of abstract concept and it's really difficult to manipulate it. What we can do is we can manipulate the claim. Now, I'm warning you again that the claim is not the same as the essence of the invention, but there's definitely similarities. And modifying a claim is very easy because it's written down. It's in pretend English. You can add words, remove words, change them, and so on. So what happens is you move back and forth from the claim to the embodiment space and back. But after you've done that, you ask yourself, how does it match my essence? The way we do it is we have a section of the application called Overview of the Invention. And in that section, we try to think out what is the essence of the invention. Let's go back to our Lego. And the embodiments are a Lego board with pieces on it according to some reflexologically correct pattern. So if you step on it, you get pressure exactly at the right points of your leg. And a second embodiment is you have an app on your phone. You can take a picture of the floor and it sees where there's Lego and it knows what's wrong with you. And it recommends how you should step on the Lego in order to get a good treatment. So the claim could be perhaps, and this is just the initial, the starting point, a plurality of Lego pieces arranged to match a reflexology treatment. Okay, let's not ask if it's novel and so on. And then the essence would appear to be a stepping surface that has like a floor that has in it reflexology protrusions. Okay, so this is a starting point, and it's actually the starting point when we saw the Legos that my grandkids left on the floor. Okay, me and their father. And now I'd like you to notice that the essence does not mention Lego. So now we have a misbalance between the essence and the claim, and the essence and the embodiments. So now we can perhaps improve the essence, okay, and say maybe it's flexible reflexology surfaces. Maybe it doesn't have to be a stepping surface. And then we also notice that the app is not limited to reflexology. So maybe there are other treatments that we can have. So we need new embodiments. Maybe it's the other way around. The embodiments are limited to reflexology because of prior art. I don't know. But that's how the process will go. Okay, the process will continue until we have a balance between the embodiments we have, the claim we're trying to claim, and our understanding of what the essence of the invention is. And we'll talk about the singular and plural in a few minutes. A few more things on relative essence, which is more common in our line of work. So there's a formulation, and I couldn't find where it came from. I thought it was Goldratt, who's a father of theory of constraints. And he considers that innovation is you take an existing system and you do one of 5 things to it. You add something, you remove something, you merge 2 things, you split something into 2, or you replace one thing by another thing. And here's what you can do. You can take an inventive embodiment and apply these 5 steps to it until you reach the prior art. Okay? And notice, you didn't start by identifying the delta. You just started exploring. And then you take these steps that you did in order to help you define what the essence is. Or you can start with the closest prior art, or several different closest prior art, and ask yourself, which changes do I need to do of these 5 types of changes in order to get to the invention? So Ilan, you mentioned expanding a balloon, and the problem with expanding balloons is that sometimes you can hit the prior art, here shown as sharp thorns. And like I said, the basic type of exploring is simply expanding the scope. And what we would like to do is expand the scope only in one direction and not in all directions. Otherwise, like the balloon, you will pop. So what does it look like when we look at it through the mirror of the patent claim? One of the ways that you expand the patent claim is by removing a constraint. Okay, it said Lego pieces, and you turn it into small pieces that don't extend more than 3 millimeters away from the ground. The problem with that is, like I said, it limits you to one-dimensional thinking, and you might get stuck somewhere. Another thing you can do is you can take a set of constraints and replace them. So that's more like multi-dimensional exploring. Let's go up and right at the same time. We'll simultaneously say it doesn't have to be Lego, and we'll say it doesn't have to be reflexology. Obviously, that's much more difficult to do. But sometimes you have to do it, especially if you have prior art. It's going to be a real pity if, because of this piece of prior art, the upper part of the balloon won't expand to the right. You want to make the balloon expand around it. And what people tend not to do with claims, and they should be doing more, is rewriting the claim. Maybe from scratch even. And rewriting the claim is equivalent to better understanding what the essence is. And yeah, I know it's a problem with the support and so on. The point is that single and multi-dimensional expanding are not optimal in all cases, or often not optimal, but they're easy to do. I'm sure you're asking yourself, okay, Mayer's talking about all these things you can do to help you figure out what the essence is. How do you know if you figured out what the essence is? And the answer is you don't know. Okay, I've had inventions that after close to 20 years, I understood that I didn't originally understand what the essence was. But here's some things we can check. First of all, is it working? We have things that's supposed to be inside, and that's embodiments, and things supposed to be outside, that's the prior art. Does it work? Is it generative? In other words, using this essence, am I able to generate more embodiments that are encompassed by that essence? We can have somebody else make up examples and check to see if the essence is capturing them or avoiding them. And we can ask, does the essence meet the task? Remember, we're writing the claim so that the competitor won't be able to do something. So is it possible to do that something without stepping on the essence? If it is, well, maybe you have the essence wrong. A very common measure people use, including myself, does it get you or the client or somebody else excited? Yeah, wow, what a beautiful invention. Okay, so that's very nice, but it's only a secondary indicator. It just means that you have a beautiful theory. It doesn't mean that it's a good one. We noted before that in some of the methods, you get a local minima, like a balance between the different parts, and you get stuck in. So one thing you can do is assume you didn't finish, you just got to local minima, and maybe you should continue looking for other essences. And then once you have 2 or 3 different essences, ask yourself, maybe there's a meta essence that combines, sells them together, consolidates them. And that is a very common recommendation that I give. If you can't write a very, very broad claim that covers everything, write 2 claims, write 3 claims. And when we're done and we'll understand better, we can perhaps consolidate. Now, each embodiment usually has more than one invention. So what we talked about, and definitely when you start exploring, you're going to find multiple essences. Okay, you have an embodiment, it gives you an essence. That leads you to a new embodiment, which leads you to a better essence, which leads you to an even newer embodiment, and that leads you to another essence, which might have some overlap and might not. And that's why one way of looking at it is that the essence generates embodiments, and the embodiments can be distilled to give you an essence. In addition to the fact that each embodiment might have more than one essence, there's often a stack of essences, okay? You're solving a particular technical problem, which allows you to build a particular technology, which allows you to build a particular product, which allows you to answer a particular need in the market, which allows the end user to do something in particular. And each one of those is a different, let's call it what for, what do I need that invention for, and really defines a different essence. And some R&D people appreciate this journey, and some of them don't. There's 2 sayings that I conflated here. One is random stomping seldom catches bugs, and the second was, if the shoe fits, wear it. And the reason why I'm doing it is because finding the essence is perhaps more like searching a value space, where each point has to be novel, as in, inventive, and correct, as in everything that it covers works. And there can be more dimensions. And then when you're searching that space, you look for the one with the highest value. So the random stomping method means that you identify an essence, and now you expand it in different directions, random directions, to get a new essence. Okay, like we did before with the Lego, and I said, oh, not Lego, it can be M&Ms. Okay, that's a random direction. And if it looks better, we use that new essence. But even if it didn't come out better, the mere fact that you went in several different directions gives you a better picture of what the essence looks like, and that can help you do a better search. Sometimes you have a problem which is atomic, and then the solution is atomic fission. Let me explain. Let's say you have an invention, and you have closest prior art, and there's one difference between the 2 of them. Okay, what do I do? I mean, that's it. That's an invention, isn't it? Maybe not. What you need to do is you need to generate a search space, and you can do that in a deliberate manner. For example, you identify multiple different benefits, multiple results, problems that are solved, technologies that could be used. And now that you've identified them, you start identifying other possible solutions. And once you've identified these other possible solutions, now we can do the 3 magic trick, where we have multiple embodiments, and we look at them and say, okay, what is the essence underlying all of these embodiments, but not underlying that prior art that we don't want to use. And of course, any standard methods used to help you become unstuck. There's a nice book, A Kick in the Side of the Head, which is about that. You can use as well. So does anything else need to be done before you can start exploring, which is, of course, a lot of fun? Well, it's important to cover what has value to the client. And it's important that you can only cover what is enabled. So if it's not enabled, you have to check to see if it could be enabled. You have to ask yourself, should or does, I don't know, the essence cover perhaps other people's trade secrets or IP? Since we're often writing patents in order to block a competitor, then we have to ask ourselves, should we perhaps redefine our essence from the point of view of such a competitor? And some people like saying that the essence is only interesting, or the invention is only interesting if it's defendable or if you can figure out if somebody's infringing and so on. So these can also be added as constraints for your search process, both of the essence and when you're exploring the invention further. Before we finish, I was talking about essence, and essence is a kind of getting abstraction. And what do people mean when they say, I'm going to abstract it, I'm going to make it more abstract? So I found a very interesting paper, which is actually a psychology paper. And it says there's two measurements which are common. One, the less precise something is, the more abstract it is, or the less concrete something is, the more abstract it is. And what this paper shows is that these are different dimensions. In other words, you can be more precise and less concrete at the same time. Now, my view, and of course there's some link here to other papers that talk about what makes something abstract, and like I said, they're very similar to essence. But in my view, when you talk about an essence, then it's not true that you're less precise. You want to be very specific about something, okay? We want to be essence, not vague. You want to be very specific about something, but try not to be specific at all about anything else. So first, yeah, it's a bit long if all we're talking about is essence. What's the take home? First, you should clean up your Lego or you won't be able to play with it next week. Identifying the essence is an art, okay? It's not even a craft. And I want to emphasize, not everybody agrees that you should actually try to identify the essence. Some people say, I have embodiments, I covered the embodiments, that's what I need to do. So I showed you all sorts of tools that I know people use, including myself. And you shouldn't apply them in the head, and you shouldn't apply them only on your claim. And you should remember the claim is only a proxy to the essence, because some things you can't write in a claim. And I'm reminding you that when you publish something and somebody is going to read your patent application or paper or conference poster, that leaks the essence. Even if you didn't spell out the essence, somebody should be able to apply one of these methods and cover the essence. Here's an example for what it looks like in real life, other than Lego. This is a more realistic situation. So you have a client who's prospecting for hydrogen, you know the new gold rush, and they launched the GPS. And even though the Borneo tiger is not very common or perhaps extinct, they're worried about it. They figured they split out some peanuts, which I agree, elephants don't eat, in order to encourage the elephants to come by and protect them and scare away the tigers. And they survived the night. We don't know why. And now they want to write a patent on a survival kit. So a lot of times when clients come to us, this is really what they're coming to, either with a story like the Lego story or with a story like these elephants. and they say, okay, what do you want me to give you? I have an embodiment, a bag full of peanuts, and instructions at what distance to lay them around the camp. Okay, so what are you going to do? Okay, so thank you. I'm ending the recording.